Welcome to Lesson 2.7 of the Grant Architect course. In this lesson, we will learn the shredding method for dissecting notices of funding opportunity and requests for proposals. Federal NOFOs and other formal funding announcements can be lengthy and complex, sometimes exceeding 100 pages. Missing a requirement buried in these documents can disqualify your application regardless of how strong your program is. The shredding method is a systematic approach to breaking down NOFOs into manageable components, extracting every requirement, and creating compliance matrices that ensure your application addresses everything the funder requires. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to dissect any NOFO systematically and create tools to ensure complete compliant applications. Various terms describe funding announcements, and understanding the vocabulary helps you navigate different funders. NOFO stands for Notice of Funding Opportunity and is the standard federal term following the uniform guidance. When you see NOFO, you are typically dealing with federal funding that follows federal grant regulations. RFP stands for Request for Proposals and is a common alternative term used by many funders, including some federal agencies, foundations, and state and local governments. The term suggests a competitive process where applicants submit proposals in response. FOA stands for Funding Opportunity Announcement, another variant term used by some federal agencies, including NIH. Like NOFO and RFP, it announces funding availability and explains how to apply. Regardless of the terminology used, these documents share a common purpose: officially announcing that funding is available, explaining what will be funded, specifying who can apply, and detailing application requirements. The shredding method applies to all of them. Complex NOFOs present significant challenges that the shredding method addresses. Length is a primary challenge. Federal NOFOs often exceed 50 to 100 pages. Foundations may issue shorter guidelines, but federal announcements are frequently lengthy. Thorough reading of lengthy documents requires substantial time and careful attention. Complexity arises from requirements scattered across multiple sections. Eligibility requirements appear in one section, application content requirements in another, submission requirements elsewhere. The same NOFO may have program requirements in some sections and administrative requirements in others. Repetition means the same requirements may appear in different places, sometimes worded differently. A page limit might appear in the application instructions, in the formatting section, and in the evaluation criteria. Inconsistencies between repeated requirements create confusion. Hidden requirements are critical details buried in dense text. A disqualifying requirement might appear in a single sentence within a paragraph on another topic. Missing these hidden requirements leads to non-compliant applications. The shredding method systematically addresses all of these challenges. The shredding method is a systematic approach to NOFO analysis that ensures complete understanding and compliance. Systematic approach means methodically processing the entire document rather than skimming or reading selectively. The method takes you through the NOFO section by section, ensuring nothing is overlooked. Systematic processing takes more time initially, but prevents costly oversights. Extraction focus concentrates on pulling out every requirement and specification. As you read, you actively extract requirements rather than passively absorbing information. Every must, shall, required, and similar directive gets captured. Organization categorizes extracted requirements for easy reference. Rather than a single list, requirements are organized by type: eligibility requirements, content requirements, formatting requirements, submission requirements, and others. Categorization makes the compliance matrix usable. Compliance tool is the end product, a matrix ensuring nothing is missed. The compliance matrix becomes your guide for application development, a checklist for application review, and documentation that you addressed every requirement. Step 1 of the shredding method is an initial read-through of the complete document. Complete reading means reading the entire document before beginning detailed analysis. Resist the temptation to start extracting requirements immediately. A complete initial read provides context that informs later detailed analysis. Overview understanding grasps the opportunity's scope and intent before diving into details. What is this program trying to accomplish? What type of work is being funded? What is the funder's perspective? Understanding the big picture helps you interpret specific requirements. Section mapping notes the document's structure and organization. How is the NOFO organized? Where are different types of information located? Understanding document structure helps you navigate efficiently during detailed analysis. Flagging concerns marks areas requiring clarification or particular attention. If something is confusing during initial reading, mark it for careful analysis later. If a requirement seems unusual or particularly important, flag it. These flags guide your detailed analysis. Step 2 involves section-by-section extraction of requirements, moving methodically through the document. Eligibility section extraction captures who can apply, any restrictions, required partnerships or collaborations, and other eligibility criteria. This section determines whether you can apply at all and under what conditions. Extract every eligibility requirement precisely. Program description extraction captures what must be accomplished, allowable and unallowable activities, program priorities, and performance expectations. This section defines what the funded project must do. Requirements here shape your project design. Application content extraction captures required narrative sections and their specifications. What sections must your application include? What must each section address? What page limits apply? What specific questions must you answer? This section guides application writing. Budget and administrative extraction captures financial requirements and restrictions. What are cost limitations? What costs are allowable or unallowable? What administrative requirements apply? Budget requirements shape your project design and proposal. Step 3 focuses on identifying requirement language, recognizing words that signal different types of requirements. Mandatory words like must, shall, required, and will indicate absolute requirements. When a NOFO says applicants must demonstrate, demonstration is required. Missing a must means non-compliance. Capture every mandatory requirement. Preference words like should, encouraged, and preferred indicate priorities that are not absolute requirements. These preferences guide what the funder values and may influence evaluation. While not technically required, addressing preferences strengthens applications. Prohibition words like may not, cannot, and prohibited indicate restrictions on what you can do or include. These words often signal disqualifying violations. Prohibition requirements are as important as positive requirements. Conditional words like if, when, and unless indicate situational requirements that apply in certain circumstances. These requirements apply only when conditions are met. Note both the condition and the requirement it triggers. Step 4 builds the compliance matrix, the central tool produced by the shredding method. Requirement listing gives every extracted requirement its own row in the matrix. List requirements precisely as they appear in the NOFO. Do not paraphrase in ways that might lose important nuance. Each requirement gets its own row for individual tracking. Source reference notes where each requirement appears in the NOFO, including section and page number. This reference allows you to return to the original context if questions arise. It also helps during application review when verifying compliance. Response location identifies where in your application you will address each requirement. If a requirement says describe your evaluation plan, note which section of your application will contain your evaluation plan description. This mapping ensures every requirement has a home. Verification columns track completion during application development. As you draft your application, check off requirements you have addressed. Review the matrix before submission to verify every requirement has been addressed. The matrix becomes your compliance checklist. Designing effective matrix format and structure makes the compliance tool more usable. Column headers should include at minimum the requirement text, source reference, requirement type or category, planned response location, and verification status. Additional columns might include priority level, responsible person, or notes. Categorization groups requirements by section or type. You might organize by NOFO section, by application section, by requirement type such as eligibility versus content versus format, or by some other scheme. Choose categorization that matches how you will use the matrix. Numbering assigns unique identifiers to each requirement. These identifiers make it easy to reference specific requirements in team discussions. Numbers also help ensure no requirements are accidentally deleted or duplicated during matrix development. Notes fields provide space for clarifications or questions. If a requirement is ambiguous, note the ambiguity. If you have questions for the program officer, note them here. If there are special considerations for addressing a requirement, capture them. The compliance matrix becomes an active tool during application development. Writing guide function uses the matrix to guide what content to include. As you write each section, reference the matrix to ensure you address all requirements assigned to that section. The matrix prevents overlooking requirements while writing. Progress tracking checks off requirements as you address them. Maintain a verification column that you update as drafts are completed. This tracking shows completion progress and highlights remaining work. Gap identification spots unaddressed requirements before submission. Before finalizing your application, review the entire matrix. Any unchecked requirements represent potential compliance gaps. The matrix provides systematic gap identification that reading alone cannot ensure. Team coordination uses the matrix as a shared reference for collaborative writing. When multiple people contribute to an application, the matrix shows who is responsible for what requirements and tracks completion across the team. The matrix becomes a project management tool. Awareness of common NOFO pitfalls helps you avoid them during your analysis. Buried requirements hide critical details in unexpected places. A page limit might appear in a section about formatting rather than content requirements. Eligibility requirements might appear in the evaluation criteria section. The shredding method catches buried requirements that selective reading misses. Conflicting statements present inconsistencies between NOFO sections. One section might say 10 pages while another says 12. The executive summary might contradict details in the full description. When you find conflicts, note them and seek clarification before assuming. Ambiguous language creates requirements open to multiple interpretations. What does demonstrate significant experience mean? What qualifies as substantial community support? Note ambiguities in your matrix and consider seeking clarification from program officers. Cross-references point to requirements in other documents or sections. A NOFO might say follow the format specified in Appendix B or comply with 2 CFR 200. Trace every cross-reference to ensure you understand and capture all requirements. Seeking clarification is appropriate and often necessary when NOFOs are unclear. When to ask includes situations with genuine ambiguity, conflicting information, or requirements you do not understand after careful reading. Do not ask questions answered clearly in the NOFO, but do ask about genuine uncertainties that affect your application. How to ask typically involves written questions through official channels specified in the NOFO. Federal programs often have designated email addresses for questions. Some programs hold webinars where questions can be asked. Follow the specified process for asking questions. Timing should be early enough to receive response before the deadline. Many NOFOs specify a deadline for questions, after which questions will not be answered. Even without a specified deadline, asking early ensures time for response and adjustment. Documentation of responses preserves clarifications for reference. Save email responses. Note webinar answers. If an official FAQ is published, keep a copy. These clarifications may differ from NOFO text and should inform your compliance matrix. Foundation RFPs and guidelines differ from federal NOFOs and warrant adjusted approaches. Shorter documents are typical for foundation guidelines. While federal NOFOs often exceed 50 pages, foundation guidelines might be 5 to 10 pages or even shorter. The shredding method still applies, but processing takes less time. Less formal structure means requirements may be less explicitly organized than federal NOFOs. Foundation guidelines might not have clear sections for eligibility, content, and format. You may need to extract requirements from flowing text rather than structured sections. Relationship context means foundation guidelines may assume prior communication. If the foundation invited you to apply after initial conversations, the guidelines may reference those discussions. Guidelines might assume knowledge from foundation relationships rather than starting from zero. Flexibility is often greater in foundation requirements. Foundations may have more latitude to accept variations in format or content than federal programs bound by regulations. This flexibility can work in your favor but also creates uncertainty about exact requirements. Maintaining matrix quality ensures the compliance tool remains accurate and useful. Accuracy verification double-checks requirements against the original NOFO. After building your matrix, verify that requirements are captured accurately. Paraphrasing or summarizing can introduce errors. Spot check to ensure fidelity to original text. Completeness review ensures all sections were processed. Review your matrix against the NOFO table of contents or structure. Are there sections with no requirements extracted? Either the section truly had no requirements or you may have missed something. Verify completeness systematically. Updates for amendments incorporate any NOFO modifications issued after initial publication. Federal programs sometimes issue amendments that modify requirements. Subscribe to notifications and update your matrix when amendments appear. Outdated matrices miss new requirements. Team review has multiple eyes catch issues that single reviewers miss. If possible, have someone else review your matrix against the NOFO. Fresh eyes spot gaps, misinterpretations, and errors that familiarity obscures. Let us summarize what we have covered in this lesson on dissecting NOFOs. The shredding method is a systematic approach to NOFO analysis that ensures you understand and capture every requirement. The method addresses the challenges of lengthy, complex funding announcements with scattered, buried, and sometimes conflicting requirements. The compliance matrix is the central tool produced by the shredding method. This matrix lists every requirement, notes its source, identifies where you will address it, and tracks completion. The matrix guides writing, enables progress tracking, identifies gaps, and supports team coordination. Process steps include initial complete reading for overview understanding, section-by-section extraction of requirements, identification of requirement language including mandatory, preference, prohibition, and conditional words, building the matrix with appropriate structure, and using the matrix throughout application development. In our next lesson, we will build on NOFO analysis skills to create eligibility checklists and go or no-go decision frameworks. These tools help you determine whether to pursue opportunities before investing significant effort in applications.